This short video discusses fixed costs, variable costs, and economies of scale. So imagine we were talking about an automobile manufacturer, and we heard the following statements. The first statement was, we have a long-term contract to purchase leather seats from a supplier for $500 per seat. Is the leather seat, in this case, a fixed cost or a variable cost? Or we heard, we have insurance for the factory building and equipment, but the premiums change from year to year. Is the insurance a fixed cost or a variable cost? Or we heard the statement, we generally spend 3% of sales on advertising each year. Is advertising a fixed cost or a variable cost? Well, the definition of a fixed cost is a business expense that does not change as a function of the level of activity of a business within a given period, i.e., it's independent of the quantity of goods or services produced by the firm. Variable costs, by contrast, are costs that are incurred with each additional unit that the firm produces or each additional customer that the firm serves. So, by these definitions, the leather seat is a variable cost, insurance is a fixed cost, and advertising is also a fixed cost. Why is advertising a fixed cost? Well, serving another customer or selling another unit of the product doesn't cause another dollar of advertising expense. The firm chooses to raise advertising expenses after that sale occurs. In a restaurant, fixed costs would be things like the rent they pay, the insurance they pay, a liquor license that allows them to sell beer and wine, the salary and benefits of an executive chef, the costs of printing menus, the kitchen equipment that they've either purchased or leased, and any IT system they've installed to facilitate order taking. Variable costs, by contrast, would be the beer and wine that they sell, the ingredients that go into making the food, to-go boxes that they use to give customers for takeaway, and perhaps any per customer fees that they pay to reservation takers like OpenTable. So suppose you were given a financial statement that shows that Niche, which is a restaurant here in St. Louis, spends $2,000 per month on utilities. Do those $2,000 represent fixed costs or variable costs? The likelihood is that those $2,000 represent a bit of both. So on the one hand, you have to pay the electricity bill no matter how many customers you serve. But on the other hand, if you serve more customers, you're using more gas to heat up the food. So the energy costs in this restaurant have both fixed and variable components. You could do a thought experiment that might ask the following. How much will the bill go up if we serve 20% more customers than we did last month? If the bill only will go up by 1%, then fixed costs represent about 95% of total costs, or 95% of the $2,000. If serving 20% more customers would raise the costs by 10% overall, then fixed costs amount to about half of the total costs in the utilities. So one of the reasons that understanding fixed costs and variable costs is important is that the greater the proportion of a firm's fixed costs, the more its average costs will decline as the business grows. So one of the best ways to understand this is to think about this mathematically. If we think of the total costs that a firm incurs as being a function of the quantity Q it produces, i.e. this C of Q function, we might model it very simply as a combination of fixed costs and variable or marginal costs, where F is the fixed cost and M is the marginal or incremental cost of producing an extra unit. So total costs to produce quantity Q equal F plus M times Q. Then simply dividing both sides by Q, we see that the average cost to produce quantity Q would be F divided by Q plus M. Note here that the average cost decreases as Q increases. The rate of decrease happens to be increasing in F. That is, the more fixed costs matter, the faster is the rate of decrease as you produce more units. So this brings us to economies of scale. So we think of a production process as exhibiting economies of scale if average costs decrease with additional units of production or as additional customers are served. On this graph, the x-axis represents output per period, and the y-axis represents dollars, and the curve is the average costs as a function of the total output produced. So this is important for a couple of reasons. First, when you're analyzing relative cost positions, you want to begin by identifying whether each cost category is predominantly fixed costs, variable costs, or mixed between them. You'll note, of course, that if fixed costs are relatively large, a firm's relative cost position will be highly dependent on your assumptions about how much it produces or what its capacity utilization is. The second set of implications relate to industry dynamics. So in many industries, if fixed costs are very high, they may represent barriers to entry that preserve firms' unique positions in an industry. It also may be the case that economies of scale generate a big advantage to being a large firm. That is, larger firms within the given industry might be more efficient. Industries in which economies of scale are large tend to be ones that consolidate over time, and industries where economies of scale are very small tend to be ones that can remain fragmented for long.